Okay, and welcome back everyone to Ethics TV. I'm joined today by Padmini, and the first question I'm going to ask, bearing in mind that everyone can read in the bio your brilliant CV and background, my question is, what's keeping you busy? What are you up to, and what's going on in your life right now that's exciting?
Let me start with saying thank you so much for having me here, Jonathan. It's a pleasure to be here today. So what's keeping me busy? Well, I feel my professional life is sort of across four areas. I am the founder of Rezonance AI. I started this about 5 months back when I moved to where I am right now to help small and medium-sized companies in my community. Besides that, I'm also the head of responsible AI growth at the AI Leadership Institute, which is run by the brilliant Noel Russell. And then the third focus is we've started this community. I've co-founded it with Yuvika Sharma, Asian Women Advancing AI. It's a community on LinkedIn. We have a grand vision of making it the global hub for Asian women in AI, so fingers crossed, working our way towards that. And finally, I'm also involved with the AI 2030, involved with their responsible AI pledge, their maturity assessment model, and all that. So it's across all this, I spend my entire day from the time I wake up till I close for the day. So it's an exciting time for me. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds it. And it's an interesting time in the whole AI space in general, I guess, because there's, aside from the technical increased capabilities, there's this kind of not necessarily concern, but increased focus point on the more responsible usage and ethical usage side of things. Is that something that you've always been interested in generally, or did you arrive at the ethical tech theme through a different path? How did you get to this part?
So I've been in the technology space for like over 25 years, and about I want to say 5 years back, I've always been interested in data, but I got into sort of trying to understand machine learning and data science and all that, and I was also sort of responsible for some AI projects. But along the way, as I started to read more about AI and how it's impacting lives, I came upon and attending webinars and seeing sort of news, reading up on news, I came across this whole responsible ethical AI aspect of it. So that sort of led me into it, and I was fascinated by it. I mean, you have like the promise and the perils of AI. So that was something that got sort of had my attention fixed, and I wanted to sort of deep dive and focus more on that, because while technology may be heading ahead, we have to have these guardrails so that we don't veer off the highway and find ourselves in a place that we shouldn't be. So that's what got me in this space of responsible AI.
And do you feel that there's any form of is there a lack of interest in that theme from big businesses or standard operating companies, or do you feel that there's a warm demand for this? I guess what I'm asking is, what's the appetite for more responsible and ethical approaches in a world that has not necessarily always been prioritizing those things?
Well, I think the answers, I guess, depends on who you ask. So I think the larger corporations are, because they are held more accountable. They're more in the news, So I think they are focusing on it. The extent of focus, I don't know. Maybe we can have more, but I think they are focusing, because now you have these frameworks from various companies that say that they are prioritizing responsible AI. But then when a lot of people, I mean, there's always that question: does it come in the way of innovation? Does it? Do you have to, like, you want to develop something now? Do you have to go back and look at this, and check off these boxes? While yes, it may appear like friction to some, I think responsible AI will help innovation, as opposed to just recklessly developing AI without having these guardrails in place. So to answer your question, I think, yes, larger corporations and even smaller ones understand the importance of AI, because in the news you do come across, like like the Air Canada incident, where it gave off a discount or a refund or something like that. So organizations have to protect themselves too from, like, legal litigations and things like that. So I think that there is a focus on it, with, especially with an AI. That's what I think.
Yeah. Well, let's hope so, right?
Yeah, at least I hope so. I don't know whether I'm being naive in thinking that way, sitting in my little bubble here, or whether it's. I am just hoping that, because you have, like, like from Microsoft, you have the whole toolkit, or NIST saying, but of course the companies have to walk that talk. They say they have it, then I think they should actually do what they're saying they plan to. Yeah,
quite right. And so from a functional lens, what I've been interested in, I mean, I'm also the founder of an ethical AI firm, and so my self, and so, which stands for Sovereign Ethical Lifestyle Filter. And my premise has always been that that there is the question really is what if big technology was self-sovereign? So what if the each individual person decided what happened to their data? And I'm drawn toward that, because this has been something that I've been, since the first days of the internet. I've always been fascinated with the interplay between what we sacrifice when we're using these tools. And if these tools are free, then most of the time we're the product. And what I'm interested in with some of the AI platforms is that they seem to be still operating a similar model, which is your individual data is training a large language model. And inside that training of a large language model, various information can be manipulated, censored, or coerced. And or information could be sold to the highest bidder through real-time bidding platforms for advertising. And I have obviously a bias toward responsible AI in terms of platform creation. Do you feel that there is a level of ethical responsibility amongst players such as OpenAI, ChatGPT, or Microsoft Copilot, or Google Gemini? Is there a responsibility that the platform creators also need to inherit?
Definitely. I think platform creators absolutely have to have to sort of do business responsibly. Now, with your data being used for training, I mean, before ChatGPT came into our lives, our data from the internet was used to train it. Or the hordes of data, we have no control over what happened then. I mean, we were merely going about searching for things. You say that do not use my data, for, like, do not sell my data. You have all those checkboxes, and you can do that. But I don't know how many of us, when we see, like, the cookies being down, how many of us go in and say manage cookies and turn it off individually, because I see more often than not, they're always enabled, which drives me crazy. I feel that I appreciate when it says a reject all in one go, as opposed to me turning each one off.
Yeah.
But all those have sort of come into place more recently. I don't know if it's after GDPR or whatever. So I think it's come into place more recently. But prior to that, I think a lot of our data was taken away for training these large language models. Having said that, now when you go into like ChatGPT, you can go and sort of say, do not use my data for training. Or even I notice even in LinkedIn, I think there's a place in data privacy where it is by default toggled on that you can use your data. You have to go in and actually manually turn it off. So I think, yes, these platforms have to bear some responsibility in not taking our data and sharing it or selling it, especially when we have not given them the permissions to do that. When you look at like a Netflix, for instance, the recommender system, sometimes I feel, it is helpful. I don't want to go through and search for movies that I like. If this knows the movies that I like, it should tell me. So there I've sort of volunteered my information, but that has been in my control. So I don't know. Yeah, as long as I know what is being used, I think I'm okay. But if it is being done sort of without my knowledge, that's where that's a big problem. And the responsibility then lands on the people providing that service.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I completely agree. Not least that's what I've built with Self. So a private AI that remembers everything for you, but only you're the only person in control of it, which is awesome. Do you feel that from a responsible, from an ethical tech perspective, is there a misunderstanding, or is responsible tech or ethical AI subjective, or are the terms objective? Is there such a thing as something that is responsible versus irresponsible, that is an absolute objective statement of fact? And the reason I ask that is because I had a conversation yesterday about what ethics meant. And my view is that, just from a first principles perspective, ethics is a collection of your moral principles. And your moral principles, at their most basic form, are your interpretation of what's right and wrong. And what's right and wrong for you is different from what's right and wrong for someone else. So do you see that as subjective or objective in terms of what's responsible and what is irresponsible?
I think there are certain principles which we can say is absolutely objective. They lie at the ends, but then we have this whole gray area which is subjective. So it's the answer is both. It's not either or. But so I think there are some things that we know very clearly that yes. When I tell you not to sell my data, do not sell my data. There is no question about it. Don't try to go behind my back and sell it. I think in any representation of it, that would be incorrect. But then there are these gray areas where you're like, well, I don't know. For one company, it may be like, yeah, we cannot cross the line, whereas for another, it would be. So it's very hard to say, whether the whole thing we draw a line, it can fall on either side. There is that the fuzzy area where we don't know. We think, so depending on what our personal ethics are, we sort of manifest that into the system that we use. So
and that's one of the things that I find is a challenge with platform creators, because their personal version of what's right and wrong may be different from our personal version. So and when someone like AI 2030 is on a mission to elevate the awareness of ethical and responsible tech, it could arguably the the definition of what's ethical and responsible could differ from one company to another. And so there's this kind of paradox between enabling people to have the freedom of definition, and also that there is a view of what is responsible and what is right, versus what is wrong. And
Yes.
how do you square that in your head? How do you calculate overall principles of right versus wrong, and how do you do that?
So I think, again, that'll be a manifestation of what I believe my ethics are like. So it's if I were to be developing something, that my flavor of ethics will come into it. So when we at AI 2030, we have this maturity assessment that we have, where we have a list of questions, that sort of feeds into, will eventually feed into a pledge. But there are, so everything is not a yes and no. There are some that are graded, where we know that, you cannot fall into like, is every department in your organization, doing X, Y, and Z? There may be some which are not. So does that mean that you're not a responsible AI company? Probably not, because you are still partway there. So I think it like I said, for me, what I think of it is ethically correct. I will base my judgment on that, which may not exactly work for somebody else if they have a different barometer for an ethical principle. So
yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? I remember I was watching Mark Zuckerberg on Joe Rogan recently, and it was interesting when he was speaking about, Mark Zuckerberg was speaking about turning off the censorship committee, essentially, in Facebook, and enabling the guardrails of that were theoretically or practically policing what people could speak about, and actually removing that from Facebook. And I wonder whether or not there are companies that can make ethical decisions, or rather make decisions that look like they're ethically based, that are actually politicized decisions. And kind of the objective is to be harmonious with a particular agenda, whereas they look like they're ethically based. Like, for instance, Elon Musk buying Twitter and turning it into X could be seen as enabling freedom of speech to live out, and for the town hall of the world to be to have a platform. Another way of viewing it is being able to control a giant amount of the voice, and therefore weaponize that to be used to fulfill certain agenda. And arguably a cynic would say that, bearing in mind the regulations on SpaceX and so forth, it would be better to work alongside politicians and regulators as the world's richest person so there is obvious politicized agenda that could be claimed by cynics. Do you, in your mission, in the activities that you do, how much do you look behind the scenes at the decision criteria that a company may be applying, or do you, in the practices, especially in the kind of the responsible AI world, do you take their face value reporting of them being responsible to be to be as good as we can get of the answer? How investigative are you on that?
So I think if like in a product manager world, you ask a question why 2 times, and you go sort of 2 levels deeper, to figure out what the actual problem is. So that is something that I like to do, where when I ask questions, or when we are answering a set of questions, to say, yes, this is being done, it would be like, how are you doing it? So, you have to dig deeper and not just take it at face value. And just going back to what you were saying about sort of, Twitter, X, and Mark Zuckerberg. I remember sometime back on Facebook there was this whole thing about posting your picture from 10 years ago.
Yeah.
I thought that was such a sneaky way of doing like facial recognition. So what the intent is, sometimes it's just not political. It could be like just that was like training, data.
Yeah.
People were just voluntarily giving their pictures from 10 years back and their current picture. And then it was such an easy way to sort of train your model and things like that. That's terrible, in my opinion. I'm on Facebook, but I don't post at all. So I'm so glad I did, So it's yeah. I things like that I don't appreciate it at all. And then going back to your question again, I always try to dig like 2 levels deeper till I'm kind of satisfied with the answer.
Yeah, I think that's important. And for anyone watching and listening here, that approach, the investigative approach, is so important with everything that we do, especially as we're looking at the technology providers and their level of responsibility. Because it's almost actually a nice way from a human interactive perspective is when you ask someone if they're okay, if you ask them twice, you tend to get the truth the second time, because everyone always says, yeah, fine. And then you say, but are you okay?
Yeah.
And then the second answer tends to be nearer to the truth than the first answer. Just
right.
Yeah. So I'm wondering also from the multicultural perspective, and I've had one of your colleagues on recently around the Asian women in business side of things. But I have a question that I wish I'd asked her about, which is, but I asked a version of it to her, and so I'm going to ask a different version now to you, which is there any form of resistance that you've picked up to the progression of Asian women in business? Have you run into any form of resistance from a corporate level, from a governance level, regulatory level, from even a human level, to the agenda of enabling or trying to bring more diversity into the workplace? Have you walked into any resistance?
I personally have not, but I have heard of stories where one is perceived like quieter, doesn't speak up, or is risk averse. So which sort of then does not open you up for like leadership roles. So I think Asian women culturally, and I'm hoping that's changing, culturally are quieter, willing to sort of say yes when maybe it's a no. Can you do this by tomorrow? Tomorrow morning? And no, I cannot, but I'll say, yeah, I think I should be able to, and then sit up all night and try to finish it. So things like that. I think culturally we are not. And something like AI, where you need diverse voices to be able to sort of responsibly develop it, it becomes important that we bring all these voices to the table. So our effort in that is to have that community, that space to say, share your experiences. When you run into a situation like this, or when this is possibly approach you take or something, just have this people who sort of think like you and have had similar experiences. I think that was one of the things that Yuvika, one of the French, Yuvika, and I sort of felt was needed, and that's why we created this space. And we started this community in mid-November, and so it's about 3 months, a little over 3 months, and we're already over 300 people in the community. So
Wow.
So we're really excited and trying to get the word out, and it's exciting. It's exciting to do something like this.
Yeah, it's really cool. Well,
Yeah.
to be honest with you, anything that moves us away from the pale male and stale fraternity of the patriarchal standard cookie cutter kind of thing. It's like, we don't need more overweight 60-year-old white men. We're fine. We're okay with that. And I'm not trying to be over woke here in terms of like, it's just basically let's just have slightly more viewpoints and a slightly more diverse understanding of life.
Right. I think it's more so because they've been the most vocal, or people have been quiet. They've been able to speak up their mind. So whether be it at a conference or just on the internet, and that's what it picked up. And and with so many people, CEOs being just white males, we found that today I came across something that said if you type in the CEO is and you leave it, the model will typically try to give you like a responses with a male name. So things like that, you have to slowly but surely keep pushing and making your way in the right direction. So that's what we're hoping to do with that.
Yeah, I think there's a saying that I've used a few times on Ethics TV, which I'll use one more time here, and I've slightly paraphrased it because the saying originally was just about a man, but I'm now going to use people. But the saying is, great people plant trees under which they will never sit. And I think that the work that you're doing, and potentially the work that I'm doing as well, is going to be mostly seen in its fullness in 50 to 100 years time, like the real benefit. Whereas right now the grassroots that we're making is and planting are very important, and it's harder to get a community of. I've realized it's harder to get the first 300 people in a community than it is to get the next 3,000. It's harder to get the first customer in a business than the next 10. So it's
self-propelling after that.
Yeah. So, and I guess you're finding that the first 30 was harder than the next 60. So
and we've tried to leverage our LinkedIn connects and then word of mouth, and so I think people are so. We have like these, we have two series that we have started. One is what is called the Innovate and Advance, which is, we bring women who have had impactful careers, to come and speak to our community. And then the other one is a more sort of technical, soft skills focus, to just for people who are interested in that. So since we've just started, we've had, I think, one of each, and it has been fairly successful. And there's so much to learn. There's always so much to learn, and and with AI, every day there's something to learn. So it's almost overwhelming, the amount of data that is thrown at you in the AI world. So we're trying to sort of consolidate that into consumable formats through all these through these webinars and meetups. Yeah.
So in that leads me to a great ending point to ask you, for anyone who's listening and interested in finding out more. I'm going to include all your links in the description, but where should people go to find out more about what you're doing if any of those things are kind of really resonating? What's the best website to get all of the resources for, especially the Asian women in business and the other things you're involved in?
Sure. So it's AWAAI. So it's Asian Women Advancing AI, and it's on LinkedIn. We are still in the process of. We've already got a domain name. We are in the process of developing the website for it. So that's on LinkedIn. So please do find us there. And to reach me, I'm also on LinkedIn. I think my LinkedIn bio would be in the section. And Also, I have my own company, which is Resonance with a Z, REZONANC, resonance.ai. So you can find me there as well.
Great.
So yeah, those are the different, yeah, I guess that's part of Noel Russell's Leadership Institute. So
Great.
several places to find me, but I think the one place that could start it all would be LinkedIn.
Great. Good. Well, thank you so much for your time and energy. And I'm really grateful that you're doing what you're doing for the less represented voices in general, and also in terms of responsible technology in general. None of this can be loud enough, and I hope that that enabling a platform for what you're doing in my little way of trying to help has some form of effect in the long term. So I really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This was wonderful.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. See you soon. Cheers.
Bye.